We're getting ready to start the show. I'm trying to make sure that all of our streams are up and running. Hopefully, trying to get that stuff squared away early as we're waiting on my co-host Chuck Snow to jump in, and we already have our guest is up and on board waiting to join in with us. It's a good thing because it gets to save me. I don't have to read off the report. We actually got the guy here that is responsible for the report, which is a good thing. So, yeah, we're trying to get everything squared away where we can actually do a live stream to Instagram at the same time. I'm not sure if that is working. We're going to try and do it again. Let's see if this will fix our issue. Da, 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 da. Y'all have to just bear with me for just a second while I'm working on trying to get our Instagram up and running. So bear with me for just a second. I apologize. We'll get started here in just a second. As a matter of fact, why don't I do this? While I'm working on that portion of it, let me go ahead. Chuck hadn't gotten here yet, but let me go ahead and welcome in our guest from DAT, Dean. Dean, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight on the Rates and Lanes podcast.
Yeah. Hey, Rico. Good to be with
We're,
you.
we're waiting on Chuck to get squared away at his hotel room. He's out traveling on the road this evening, so he's having a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue. But every week on the Race and Lanes podcast, we always read off the DAT trend lines report, and Dean is directly responsible for that report. So it saves me from having to go through and try to read all that good stuff because we have the man, the myth, the legend himself that is here with us that
Yep.
can just kind of dig into all of those things and go into the numbers. Before
Yep.
we jump into that directly, though, I want to let everyone know that is looking in, that's joining us live. Um, Check out the chat feature. If you have a question, if you want to get involved, type your question into the chat, and we'll try to make sure that we get it highlighted on the show and get you up and on board so that you can ask your question directly. We're still waiting on Chuck to join us, and hopefully he doesn't have any issues. And I'm going to work on trying to get the Instagram live feed up and running so that we can have try to stream across all of the different platforms that we have available to us. So with that being said, Dean, I'm going to step away for I'm still going to be here, but I'm going to be working in the background. So if you don't mind,
Okay. I'll
jump
take it over.
into jump
Yep.
into the numbers for the week, and let's kind of dig into what's been going on the spot market right now, and then and hopefully by then maybe
Yep.
Chuck will be here, and we'll go in a couple of different directions. I have numerous questions and lots of stuff to ask. I love when
Yeah.
we have you on the show because it gives me an
Yeah.
opportunity to pick your brain. So
Yeah.
with that being said, I'm gonna turn it over to you for a second while I work on the backside of it and try to get this other stream up and running.
Yeah. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on, Rico. After we saw some amazing things last week after spot rates in dry van dropping 74 cents since the start of the year. They actually reversed course last week and went up about 4 cents a mile. So remember, these are line haul costs. This doesn't include fuel. So these are just the pure line haul base rates. They've been sliding down as the fuel surcharge has been going up. But of course, what happens every year during road check week, which was last week, the 72-hour safety blitz, is we see a lot of carriers take time off for all sorts of reasons. I think this year carriers took time off, A, because they could afford to, B, because I think a lot of guys have got parts that they'd rather have on the truck and fixed, things like cracked windscreens that they can't get, replacements for. I know some guys that were sitting out the week because they had defective parts, not because they were sloppy, just because they couldn't get parts. So I think there was a bit of that going on. So last week we saw carrier equipment posts, which is how we measure capacity. The number of carriers posting their trucks for loads last week dropped 16% last week. And for those listening, that's about double the rate we have seen in the previous 5 years during Road Check Week. So a lot of carriers opted out last week, didn't post their trucks on our load boards, and that changed a lot of things. Capacity tightened because there were fewer trucks on the road, and that pushed spot rates up in dry van by about 4 cents per mile. It doubled the load truck ratio to about 5.6 loads per truck. Similar story in refrigerated. Reefer carriers generally take more time off than dry van carriers each year. And so equipment posts, so that the number of drivers posting their trucks on our load board dropped about 18% last week compared to the week before. Again, that's about double, just over double what we'd normally see in previous road check years. Load to truck ratio was more than double at 11.5. Flatbed, though, quite the opposite. It's a great year for flatbed carriers. Load post volumes increased 8% last week, but only 6% lower than last year. So there's Chuck.
How are you guys?
You're good, Chuck.
Little bit of Hilton honors here.
Yeah, they came through.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. I'm just probably about halfway through the market update, so I'll keep going if you like.
Yeah, please.
So on the load post volumes, we're still seeing very healthy load post volumes in the DAT network. Spot market load post volumes are a really good indicator of market health. And in dry van, this is an amazing statistic, Chuck, Rico. The volume of load posts in our dry van network last week was only 2% lower than this time last year. So we're still seeing, 1.4 million loads being posted. The volume of loads in the refrigerated market was almost double what it was the week before. So still a really healthy spot market, even though rates are going down. That's a function of higher contract rates, largely, and I think more capacity in the market. We've had a lot more trucks into the industry in the last 18 months, so that's definitely playing a role. But to summarize the movement on spot rates, and I'll quote you a couple of numbers here. One is line haul without fuel. So dry van went up 4 cents to an average of $2.04. That's line haul ex fuel. Fuel, you'd have to add, 68 cents this week? You'd have to add 69 cents to that to get the all-in rate. Refrigerated up 8 cents a mile last week. It's a pretty big jump for refrigerated line haul rates. Of course, we've had a very slow start to the produce season. It's just starting to kick into gear in southern Georgia, the southeast region. So the national average for refrigerated loads last week, line haul was $2.35. If you add fuel, it was just over $3 a mile at $3.03. And in flatbed, again, flatbed's been a pretty good, pretty solid, consistent performer this year. Rates were up about a penny per mile last week after dropping for the previous 3 to 4 weeks. National average flatbed rate was $2.61 last week. If you include fuel, it was about $3.29. So pretty good, a great week for carriers last week. Spot rates reverse course after dropping for the best part of the year. What we don't know is whether it'll be sustained or not next week. What I will say is that we saw this same effect last year during Road Check Week. Spot rates increased, and of course we're into Memorial Day. Grilling season starts on Monday. We're into grilling season, which means a lot of refrigerated freight. We've got Independence Day. We've got more safety check weeks coming up after that. So and of course produce season. So we're in one of those seasons where normally there's a lot of inflationary pressure on spot rates. So I'm looking for things to continue on. But again, we're week to week with a lot of this data that we're looking at because the market is still so turbulent. But what I will sort of wrap up with is that we've seen the market turn around. If you look at contract rates, which is about sort of 85 to 90% of the volume of freight, in our DAT network, contract rates are starting to plateau and level off.
Right.
I think one of the really important things for carriers to think about is, think about contract rates as like the climate, whereas spot rates are like the weather. The weather is what's today's weather. That's what the spot rate is,
Right.
and contract rates are the long climatic conditions. And what we're seeing is that the long-term contract rates that most freight is hauled on, this is going to sound really strange, but the rate of increase is decreasing. It's getting slower. So what we're seeing is the contract rates that were negotiated between shippers and carriers and brokers late last year and into this year, they've been entering the routing guides. In the fortnight at the start of May, they were up 11% compared to the last 2 weeks of April. In the last 2 weeks, they're only up 6%. So they're increasing at a decreasing rate, if that makes sense. But so what's happening is contract rates are starting to hit their peak and come down. And of course, contract rates follow spot rates on about a 4 to 6 month lag. So we're looking for spot rates are coming down. They will drag contract rates down over time. And then we're into that next part of the market cycle is when capacity increases and rates cool off. And it looks like we're certainly at that inflection point right now, noting that we're still waiting to see produce season kick in and drive reefer volumes substantially higher as they normally do between now and July 4. But just great news for carriers last week. Rates turned. When the carriers come back to the market next week after road check week, it'll be interesting to see what happens with rates. But from what we can see from all the demand indicators, we're still seeing pretty solid consumer demand for freight, whether it be retail freight, steel, machinery. There's still pretty solid economic indicators that support a fairly robust truckload market, notwithstanding some sort of catastrophic event that might change things as is wont to happen in the last couple of years. So that's the market update for this week. A good week.
Well done. Yeah. I think carriers do have. I think the market is holding. A couple of things, and tell me what you think. But my feeling is on the reefer rates right now, and the amount of reefer freight we're seeing. I really do believe some of it is just a change in buying habits for consumers. I think that people have been locked up in certain areas, especially where we live in Canada, but up some of the areas in the US, and all of a sudden they were able to go out to restaurants. And if you've been to a restaurant lately, it's pretty darn expensive. Even a cheap restaurant has become what a medium restaurant used to be. And I think people have chosen to start eating more meals at home. I think the novelty of going out for a cheap meal for $100 for two has worn off very quickly. And I think people are perhaps eating more meals at home, which is costing, it's more cost effective, of course, but they eat more because, of course, when you go to, your favorite pub or whatever, everything is portion controlled. And when we eat at home, especially if you're like Rico and I, we four chicken breasts, because they're there. And I don't think we're out of the ordinary. I think people do that. And the other thing that I'm thinking is hitting the freight world right now. We're still in a shortage of supply. There's definitely the whole supply chain has not loosened up to any great degree. And what we're seeing is a lot of shippers are not shipping the 44,000 pounds or 43,000 pounds or the 21 pallets that they usually do. They're just shipping out sometimes 8 pallets, and they go, you know what, just move it as truckload, get the damn thing there, because I've got to make this order. I'm going to lose this account, or we got to keep the production line going. So I think we're seeing an awful lot of that. What's your take on that, guys?
We've, in our I think it varies by commodity, Chuck. We've seen, in our sort of retail freight side of our business, we're seeing a fairly rapid build up in inventories. A lot of that freight has moved, warehouse into the warehouse,
Right.
what we call the upstream part of the supply chain. And then, of course, you go to that secondary phase, which is downstream, where you have retail shop fulfillment. But on the upstream side, we've seen fairly robust movement. I think there's a lot of inventory build that's going on right now, as Lowe's and Home Depot reported in their recent earnings calls. Even Amazon announced today that they're trying to let go of some of their retail space or warehouse space because they've bought too much online. So it seems like we're on the cusp of something changing there. On the produce side, I think it's a little bit different depending on what market you're in. We're
Right.
seeing pretty strong demand in food services. So we're in that, I sort of jokingly mentioned grilling season, but this is graduation season, wedding season, party season, grilling season starts. So we're seeing really strong demand for the sort of edible foods part of the refrigerated side of the industry. What's
Right.
dragging that down, what's dragging volumes down, is the slower start to the produce season. Much colder in the southeast region. California's off to a terrible start. So I think it depends on what market vertical and what consumer sector you're in,
Right.
as to how it's playing out. But what that means for carriers is it's more of the same, because we've seen that same imbalance in commodity volume or freight volumes by commodity type for the last 2 years. So we still haven't seen things return to normal
Oh no.
at all. So I think then that's good for carriers. I think it's a good thing, because it means there's volatility in the market. Where there's volatility in the market and uncertainty, it means there's opportunity. So
Yeah.
I always look at this as a good thing.
So, Dean, I got a question for you. I was having a little bit of an issue trying to work out the little technical part and get my audio and stuff back up and going, but I think I got it squared away now.
Okay.
You're doing good.
Here we are. We're starting to return back to a little bit of normalcy, just a little bit.
Right.
And now the inflation has kicked in the overdrive, and it's driving. We got record high cost of fuel, everything else. Of course, the supply chain. We're still dealing with all of the issues with the supply chains and stuff of that nature. Where do you, if you can look into your crystal ball, how do you see the next 3 to 6 months playing out as far as spot market freight is concerned?
Yeah, let's assume that we don't have some radical change in fiscal policy by the Feds, right? So they don't do something that really slows down consumer demand. So for the moment, consumers are very resilient, especially here in the US. They've still got incredible purchasing power, still got incredible amount of savings. They're still buying things, even though there's sort of a little bit of a decrease in confidence. But that's not a big part of the freight. The biggest part of the freight we haul is industrial production, the heavier side of the economy, and those volumes are up 6.5% year over year. We're actually having a really good year on the manufacturing front, notwithstanding the supply chain shortages. So why I'm saying that is, despite the talk of freight recessions this year, we've got all the economic indicators that suggest we've got pretty good demand. And I think my instinct tells me that freight rates are going to stay about where they are and maybe sort of bounce around a little bit, maybe increase towards July 4, but stay relatively flat is what I would say. I don't see rates going down anymore, because you're starting to get below what it costs to operate a truck, way below break even. I think I just don't see the produce season having the material impact on spot rates it normally does around July 4. Normally from about now to July 4, you could see 20 to 30 cents a mile increase. I don't think we'll see that this year. So I think it'll be more flat, if anything, through to the holiday shipping season. You'll start to see some rates movement upwards when you get towards Thanksgiving. So I think I'd suggest it be flat. That's what my instinct tells me, Rico, barring some sort of a calamity that happens in the market.
So here's another question I wanted to, because I want to take full advantage of the opportunity that we have here since we got you on, Dean. You're privileged to all the numbers that DAT has. So for a cheat sheet for our listeners and people that are listening in, where would you say would be a good place for people to focus on the spot market and let's try to break it down for each segment type, for flatbeds, for dry vans, and for reefers. What area of the country do you think
Right.
there could be some serious opportunity for people that are for those different segment types?
Okay, it's a great question. Produce is reefers is an obvious one with produce season, right? So you got cherries in California, you got Georgia peaches coming online, watermelons out of Florida. You can have blueberries coming out of Hamilton, New Jersey shortly. Seems to be always a shortage of trucks to haul spuds out of the Red River Valley and San Luis Valley in Colorado, I think it is. And then you're going to have lots of demand up in Washington State. So I think all those produce regions are you got to get in there. There's a fair few deadhead miles to get in there, so that means the rates are higher coming out. So I think that one's a bit of a layup for carriers in the reefer space. For the carriers in the dry van space, I would watch a couple of lanes. My barometer lane for the health of the dry van industry is Los Angeles, California to Chicago, and then following on from that, any other port market. So we talked about it on the last show. There's been a substantial shift in freight volumes away from the West Coast to Houston, Savannah, Tampa, Charleston, Norfolk, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Baltimore, Philly. So what you're seeing is a shift in import freight from overseas to the East Coast. So you got to watch all of the port markets really closely, because and it literally happened yesterday. They suspended talks, the contract negotiation talks between the labor unions and the ports. They suspended talks in the labor negotiations to June 1st, which was every shipper's big fear, was that they were trying to bring all of this import volume in from Asia at a time when they've got these labor contract negotiations on, which represent 22,000 workers in 29 ports, and which involves about 12% of our GDP. So the West Coast has already had congestion issues. Now they've got labor contract negotiations that have been suspended. And for dry van carriers, what that means is shippers and importers are going to want to move import volumes away from Los Angeles, as they have been doing for the last year. But I think, Rico, what'll happen now is this: you've got well over 400 ships waiting to load off the number 1 and 3 ports in China. When that volume starts moving, can you imagine what the ship congestion is going to be off ports, and the volume of containers, and why carriers need to watch this? It'll be the same as last year when the surging import volumes come into a port. The volume of containers overwhelms the physical space.
Right.
It overwhelms the rail network and the road network on the contract freight side, and that volume spills over into the spot market. So you will see in like we're seeing it in Houston, we'll see it in Charleston, where they've got a big deep port now. I'd be watching all of those port markets where you'll see more volume come in. Port markets you might normally think about. Mobile, Alabama, you'll see good volumes coming in there. Savannah, Tampa. So I think that's going to be the big story. I would watch that very closely. The reason I mentioned Los Angeles, Chicago, that's a real bellwether for dry van rates nationally. A lot of the country takes its cues from that Ontario, Los Angeles. They're the 2 of the largest markets in the country. Right now, those rates are really, really low. They're about 80 cents a mile lower than this time last year, because the import volumes are way down. But when those import volumes start to surge again, those rates will come back up. So I think carriers have got to watch the news very closely on the import front, because that will dictate, I think, a lot of the volumes in those port markets. And maybe I can wrap up with flatbed. Houston's our biggest market for flatbed in the spot market by far. Some of the numbers I watch very closely are the oil rig drilling numbers, the Baker Hughes weekly drilling rig report. It tells you how many drilling rigs are being opened up and drilling for oil and gas. That means, casing, drill pipe, mud, all sorts of stuff has to get hauled out into those oil fields. I watch those numbers very carefully, as I do steel numbers. Steel's not, it's down about 3% year over year. And but that's the big one I watch, Rico, is the sort of the steel. The steel industry is a big player in our market. So In fact, steel generally goes into a lot of different parts of the manufacturing industry entirely. But if you said at a very high level, what's a great data point to watch? I watch chemical carloads on the rail network, and it's a weekly report. You can find it in Railway Age, but it's the volume of chemicals moving in those big, I think they're 90-ton carloads. They're called carloads,
Right.
those big rail tankers, because chemicals are used in every single manufacturing process for the stuff that trucks haul. So if you wanted to watch one thing, the health of the whole trucking industry, you could look at chemical carloads and draw a line from that and figure out how healthy things are. So that's sort of the things that I'm watching very closely on the three modes.
And when you're watching the number of chemical carloads right now, are you seeing volumes way up as compared
Yes,
to?
wouldn't say way up, but they're certainly up. On the intermodal side, where we and I'm just going to pull up that data to answer that question exactly based on today's data that came out. Intermodal volumes are down about 8% year over year, which is kind of interesting. They're our big competitor when you get over 450 miles.
Right.
We compete very heavily. But if I pull up United States carloads for chemicals right now, I'll do it on. We have been trending above last year. Year to date, so we're about the same as where we were this time last year. So we are up slightly year over year, and trending. I would say trending flat. So it's not going up, it's not going down, but we are doing better this year than last year, which again fits a lot of the economic narrative around how good our industrial economy's been going.
No, with some of the reason for it being a little bit flat. Be that what's going on with China being shut down for the last few weeks. So it's not coming over from there. So it's not being loaded on the tanker cars on the U.S. ports.
Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility. And it's also, some of the, production issues but US manufacturers are dealing with.
Right.
That's impacting their, their volume requirements. So yeah, there's still lots of disruptions, but it's a very important indicator generally.
Now, how much longer does it take one of these container ships to deliver on the East Coast? Because they're going around, way around, rather than delivering to anywhere on the West Coast.
I should know this number off the top of my head. It says 3-week transit. I think it's in the order of 10 to 12 days is the difference, East Coast versus West Coast. But the big difference, though, Chuck, is the size of the vessels that can get through the Panama Canal. A lot of those big trans-Pacific ships are the really big ones that, the massive ones like the Ever Given, they won't fit through the Panama Canal. So the Panama Canal is maxed out at 14,000 containers, 20-foot equivalent. So it's a different type of vessel that runs that circuit. And that's why the East Coast ports have all deepened their ports, like Houston and Charleston and Elizabeth, New Jersey, so they could get all of the big Ever Given type 24,000 TEU vessels, not coming from across the Pacific, but coming across the Atlantic. And what that means is you'll leave Asia and go through the Suez Canal and then through the Strait of Gibraltar across to the East Coast. You don't go near the Panama Canal. So there's a different mix going on right now. And that's why in the last 10 years, all those East Coast ports spent billions of dollars adding more ship-to-shore cranes, more berth length and deepening their ports so they could have a higher percentage of container volume come in direct to the East Coast, which means for truckload carriers, that's why you're seeing so much freight volume now on the East Coast in ports like Savannah, and why you would look at the economics for a lot of carriers now, a lot of shippers now, it'll be economically advantaged to them to dray long distances out of Savannah and Charleston now, as opposed to putting it onto the West Coast and putting it on a train. Now, for some people, trains offer some, because they're slower, they offer them more mobile warehouse space.
Right.
Right. So if you've got a warehouse inventory issue, sometimes the train helps you in that regard, just like trailer pools do when people are not unloading them quick enough.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive way, even though money's cheap, you've got your material coming
Right.
at you really slowly in order to
Right.
save on warehouse space.
Yeah.
It sounds ridiculous, but these businesses are all run by
Yeah.
very smart people. They know what they're doing,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
in order to get their numbers up.
Yeah. There was a story in the Journal of Commerce this week. Port of Savannah, Georgia Ports Authority, was starting to ratchet down their forecasts for import volumes this year. So we're kind of at a crossroads. Because if you read the earnings calls from, the big box retailers, they're talking about a really big buildup of inventories. They've got a lot of inventory. So and there you've got the big shutdown in Shanghai when the people are still working. They're locked in factories. They're still working, but the trucks can't get in and out of the ports. It's the truck side that's really held up. But the big problem is, do people start to decrease their level of imports because they've already got a lot of inventories?
Right.
Or do we bank on that normal seasonal volume of freight coming in? The latter is what we're being told people will still try and do, and that is bring in as much of the volume for fall and holiday season shopping now. Like they'll try and pull it in as soon as they can, but what we don't know is when that's going to happen. I think that's the really big question. I think it's inevitable that peak season shipping volume will head towards the US at some point, and when it does, it's going to hit in a pretty big way.
We have a family member that's in the retail business, a large store retail business, and this is up in Canada. They have a franchise, and they've been buying and sitting on more inventory than ever before, just because they're afraid of disruptions. As a matter of fact, I bought a little rowboat for our pond. It's not even it's like a dinghy. And the woman in the store said, we've had this thing since March, and that's really unusual for us to have something so big in a store for 3 months. We just don't do that. It was way up on top. She apologized because it took so long getting it down. She said, but we're just holding so much inventory.
Yeah, I think that's going to be we're already seeing, lots of discounting going on in certain commodity lines like clothing. So I think I've always wondered about when we would stop buying a lot of these one-off purchases that we did during the early part of the pandemic, things like TVs, desks, chairs, outdoor furniture. It would appear that we are there. We've bought all of that and we're looking forward to traveling and spending more on services. But I'm continually amazed at the resilience of the US consumer. I was shocked during the pandemic that we spent so much money on stuff that trucks hold, and we're still doing it.
Well, you know what? You did bring up a really good, valid point at the beginning, and that is that people weren't out spending money during the pandemic. So now people that, even though they're paying, $5 or something for a gallon of gas, they still have money because they didn't spend it for so long because there was no place to spend it. Even if you wanted to spend it, you couldn't buy anything. So it's sat in the bank.
I don't know about that one, Chuck.
How much can you buy at Amazon, Rico? Come on.
It's a lot of. Well, I can speak for the state of Georgia down here. I mean, I know, we may have been a little bit of an outlier, but Georgia never really closed.
Right.
And I mean, so and the people that I know and people in my circles, they definitely are feeling. They definitely are feeling the pinch of the inflation kicking in, the increased cost of gas. It's definitely a real topic of discussion around a lot of the people that I know in the different circles that I've been in. So I'm not sure. It's a real deal, and today is it's election day down this way. So
right.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the surveys show that retail consumers are sort of going from high-end brands to no-name brands. So if you think about the volume, it's still the same volume of freight. It's just a different price point for consumers. So inflation is definitely having an effect. There's no question about that. People are being more selective about what they're buying. But I don't know that we've seen that in the truckload space yet. We're still seeing a really robust, truckload economy from all respects. We're not seeing truckload volumes, whether you're looking at industrial machinery, appliances, consumer packaged goods. We're still seeing higher volumes this year compared to last year. So still no
Dean,
sign of it slowing down.
Dean, let me ask you this. I don't know if you have access to these numbers, or if you do, if you could share them with us. But how much? I want to think of the proper way to try to word this question when it comes to spot market rates. When it actually comes down to the nuts and bolts of the rates, are you seeing that rates have they really started to decline a good bit, and you just been making people have been making it up off of the fuel surcharge or whatever, or are you seeing that the rates are just kind of starting to go down, versus how the rates were going through the roof when fuel wasn't as cheap as it is now?
Well,
What are some of
yeah.
the things that you guys are seeing on your end on DAT side?
Well, if you look at all-in rates, so you look at the base, the baseline line haul rate plus fuel, it's exactly the same today as what it was a year ago. It's at 270 a mile. So you say, well, how is that possible if fuel's gone
Right.
up, if the fuel surcharge has doubled? Well, the base line haul rate has come down dramatically. And that's a phenomenon that I can't understand. I don't understand how this happens, but it happens. When you have fuel surcharge goes up, it puts pressure on the line haul rate to go down. Now, the assumption there is that everybody's getting the fuel surcharge, but we know that's not the case.
Right.
And there is a differential, right? So if you think, carriers are diesel's 85 cents a mile today for an owner operator or thereabouts, and the fuel surcharge is just under 70. So even the fuel surcharge is not full recovery.
No.
And I know a lot of owner operators that, if they get an all-in rate. So if the all-in rate doesn't include a decent component and they're paying retail at the pump, eventually it just erodes their margins. So we're seeing all-in rates about the same, if that answers the question.
Well, two things that most owner operators that are experiencing that are not necessarily, that it may not be getting a fuel surcharge for one. Like I say, if you're dealing strictly on the spot market, you're dealing with an all-in rate, so you got to figure out and understand how to calculate that. And then part two, just like they're not getting a fuel surcharge, so to speak, they are not necessarily receiving
Right.
a lot of detention pay as well, because you're still having the issue of getting unloaded. In a real world scenario, you still having to wait 4, 5, 6 hours if you're at grocery warehouses to get unloaded, and that's a real conundrum when you're trying to maximize your profitability, and because the hours is critical. We had Rick Gobble on, and we were talking about hours of service and everything last week. And it's just it's critical to try to be able to maximize those 14 hours that you have to try to get as much profitability as you possibly can. But when you're kind of hamstrung by, I think we have to start, for smaller guys, have to start learning how to make sure that you're negotiating all of these different variables before you accept the load. You need to start making sure that you're getting that you're taking all of these different variables into account. Are you seeing more with companies that have a problem with unloading quickly and stuff like that? Are you seeing, or do you have the ability to see whether or not there are more declines on those type of on that type of freight?
Yeah, we don't see it. We don't see that data, Rico, but anecdotally, that's what we're hearing, right? Is that carriers are being more selective. Now, it kind of, in a tight truckload market like last year, shippers were more compliant. When capacity loosens like this, it goes the other direction really fast, and carriers generally, are not very good at the detention piece. We give shippers 2 hours of free time, which is kind of crazy when you think about how long it takes. But the real issue is that extra, if your 6 hour example, If you give a carrier a shipper 2 hours, that extra 4 hours is 200 miles, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
and so what I don't think carriers do is then back into what the rate per mile needs to be to cover the opportunity cost of sitting on that dock and burning through 4 hours when they should have been on the road rolling. So we normally, as an industry, we don't have a weight surcharge. I would love to impose a weight surcharge so that shippers knew exactly what it took. You get to, we give you an hour, and then after that, it's X cents per mile, just like a fuel surcharge, because it's a
It was heading there, guys, and what happened was, is capacity loosened,
right.
any chance of recovering that lost time is gone. Because when we have so much capacity, or we have enough capacity, it changes. Now, the only thing I did see throughout the pandemic, was certain warehouses that didn't have staff on prior to the pandemic, and they'd been using outsourcing their loading and unloading of trucks to labor services, and they couldn't get help.
Right.
And we actually had to fire a couple of really good potential receivers, because we couldn't go in there because they were taking crazy, like 6 hours was nothing. It was 11, 12 hours to get unloaded because they didn't have the help. Um, and that goes on right now because there is a shortage of labor.
Yeah, and
So
that's what I mean by that's what's killing the small guy. The small guy is sitting up here, and he's got a truck note, he's got a trailer note,
Yeah.
the increased cost with fuel. Got to make sure you're putting back money for repairs, taxes, so on and so forth. And then you're killing this productivity by keeping him at a dock all day long, and he's not able to go and get his reload, or he's losing load because due to that situation. That is. That's kind of the fly in the ointment, and that's the thing that I think from the drivers. We are an advocate for the small guy and for the small carrier. That's what this show and that's what this channel is all about, trying to help the small guy to be able to get the best opportunity that he can to maximize his profitability. And I think that this is something that I don't know. I'm open for suggestions on how we can try to come up with solutions, because I got interviewed by a news channel once at a truck stop. They was asking me questions about doing the supply, at the height of the supply chain things, and I think that what the public doesn't realize is they think prices are high now. What happens if the trucking companies, the small trucking companies, was fairly compensated for what it was that they actually have to go through on a day in a day out basis? Because I that's a real conundrum, that we still have a lot of people that are not being properly compensated, and that's a problem for us that are trying to grow our fleets and trying to hire drivers. If you've got a driver in a truck that you're trying to hire, and he's away from home and he's sitting at a dock, I mean, he's pissed off because he's not able. We're paying him by the mile. That's the old antiquated way that we've been doing things in this industry. We pay by the mile, or if you say or even if you go percentage, and I'll go there for a second. Even if you say you pay a driver by a percentage of the load, hell, if he's only getting 2 or 3 loads in a week,
right.
Yeah, and that's Rico. It goes back. That's why we have a shortage of drivers.
Exactly.
You have somebody that's been doing it. It doesn't matter if they've been doing it for 20 years or they've been doing it for 6 months, but at some point they just go, you know what? I don't want this anymore. I'll go work for YRC or ABF, get paid by the hour, and go and bump docks. And if they take 8 hours to unload me, big deal. I'll read comic books or look at my Instagram while these guys unload me or load me. But I'm not working for free anymore. So if we do keep them in the industry, they will go to those places, those big, large LTL carriers to pay by the hour for regional work. But chances are those long haul guys, a lot of those guys are just going to get fed up, and they'll go and, these people have all sorts of different skill sets. They can work in a shop, an awful lot of them. Other ones can work, a lot of them are great with equipment, so they can work for a construction company. and get to sleep in their own bed every night, and we'll never see them again. We can go to all the schools we want to and try to convince kids that this is a great life. And if they get out there and they find out, well, geez, I just worked 2 hours, I drove 400 miles, and they expect me to sit at a dock for 6 hours, of which I get paid for 4, but I don't get paid for 2. And my friend's working somewhere else on a construction site, and he gets paid for every minute he works. I'm going to go work with him. And I hear they have a dump truck, and I could drive it if I want.
It's a systemic problem in the industry, right? You've got, I mean, this is a problem in, where I'm from in Australia. It's less of a problem in Europe, where they get paid an annual salary.
Right.
It's a whole different ball game. But this is sort of the systemic problem we have, because this is sort of the nature of the spot market, the wild fluctuations, the ups and downs. When times are great, there's a lot of opportunity. But when times get tough like this, where we get impacted a lot by all of these other things that affect our utilization levels. But I think the pandemic has proven one thing, and that is that long distance truckload capacity is going to be very tight, forever. I don't see it ever getting any different, because there's so many better opportunities for younger people to work closer to home and earn a good salary. And one of the earnings calls from one of the large carriers last week, they said our average truck, this is like a 5,000 truck fleet, their average truck's only getting 1,500 miles a week.
Wow.
Right. And so that's, if you do the math on 60 hours a week, that's like $17 an hour. Who's going to, but the next line item was annual turnover was 148%. Well, no kidding.
That's expensive. You know what?
Wait. Annual turnover was how much, Dean?
148.
148%. It's like a revolving door. Well, if you can only get 300 miles a day, like, and you're sitting on a loading dock so long, like, you're not going to keep drivers. So we've got a systemic utilization problem in the industry. It's not a technology; it's how trucks are dispatched. And I think a lot of it, Rico, is exactly what you said. It comes down to the inefficiencies at the warehouse. That's where we burn so much of our efficiency, because there's no integration. And we're kind of sitting on a dock. There's no communication. We're not integrated with the appointment time system. There's just so much inefficiency there, and it's a difficult one to solve.
Well, and on the power only is, you drop your trailer at a freight yard somewhere, and you pick up another one, and hopefully there's no rips in the roof or something like that. And which does happen. But the idea certainly frees up a driver's time, where he or she can do an awful lot more miles, because when you hear
better.
And Rico, I remember years ago, JB Hunt, and I don't think I'm telling stories out of school, their turnover was close to that, and they got around it. I don't think JB Hunt does any
I think literally for years the industry standard has been over 100% turnover, but man, 148. Jeez Louise. I mean,
but the cost though of and I tried to explain this to somebody, that the cost of recruitment is so much more than it is retention.
Mm-hmm.
How much money it costs to recruit 148% of your workforce? It's more money than we could dream of.
It's a crazy business model. But there's some companies, if you said what's an average, you could probably say 85 to 90% would be average in the long haul sector. It's still a difficult job. It's still a really hard job. Truck driving is just a hard job. But I think, as I've always said, the steering part's easy. It's the non-driving stuff that just drives people out of the industry. And I think one of the challenges I've always seen is the dispatcher process. Seems to be very manual, prone to errors, managed by people that don't understand what drivers go through, and can't navigate around that to get them the miles they need.
Well, don't don't even understand basic geography.
Well, I get to that.
Rico, it's only 2 inches between Detroit and Chicago. What do you mean?
That's what I was getting
at. I mean, they don't even know. It surprises me the amount of people that are even on the broker side, on the dispatch side, that doesn't that really has no idea how the United States is laid out geographically and understand where, in relation to what city is close to this city and so on and so forth. They don't even know. Hell, sometimes they're looking at the load information and they don't even know what damn state you in. I'm like,
yeah. Well, 300 miles from Boston to New York is very different than Dallas
absolutely.
to Albuquerque, New Mexico, right?
Yeah, well, that's a full day's work. If you're lucky, you can do it in 10 hours.
You're going to dig yourself out of potholes. Oh, like man.
So, how about this, Dean? I want to know if maybe what are some things that you think could help that you guys offer at DAT? Does DAT do they have any like live classes or training anymore or is it just surrounding their particular products that they do some more training on their products? And for people that are listening in that have load boards, I want you to understand this. Take the time, if you have a higher tier load board, especially if you're with DAT. I can't speak to the other ones, but I know this was the case with DAT when I was with DAT. If you get in contact with your account rep and get them to walk you through all of the different features that your load board has. Don't just you may think that you know how to move around the load board pretty good, but you need to get someone that knows that software in and out like the back of their hand, that can show you a lot of different tricks and tips that may be able to help you optimize your load searching, creating your dumbbell or creating your triangles, all of that different stuff. If you get with your rep, they can show you a lot of different things and a lot of different nuances that you may not be aware of that you can do within their software.
Right.
But does DAT offer anything, any other services or anything like that people listening in might be able to take advantage of?
We do, and I'll get you that information so we can get it out on the show next week. I'll get in touch with my people. But there's a couple of product things we're working on that are exactly aimed at what you're talking about. We're talking about today with our product people. One of the things we're doing is helping carriers with more to help match loads to their requirements better. So it could be, for example, if you've only got 50 hours left on your 60 and it's Friday, well, you're not going to take a 15-hour dispatch. You're going to want to select loads that fit your window of time available. So we're trying to figure out ways that can better match loads, because one of the things that happens in the broking world, right, it's very transactional. It's one load at a time, but that's not how you think. You're playing chess and you're like 5 moves ahead. What we want to do is build into the software and the load board is multiple load selections that get you your weekly target, not just the rate for today's load. Because you may want to take a lower rate today to get into a better position tomorrow that gets you more miles per tractor week. So we're trying to build some more intelligence into our system. But the other product we're building, it's a really good one. Right now, if you go into our rate view product and like you have our load board, which has a rate. The other part of our rating system is you can see what the rate is on a lane. So you could see Atlanta to Lakeland, Florida, right? You can see what the rate is historically. So that's like a lane rate. What we're building is a shipment rate. So what does it cost to move this shipment today based on the weight, the dimension, the load, the lead time, the pickup time? So it's not just a rate for the lane historically, it's what we think this particular shipment should move at. And that sort of information will be really powerful for carriers to have at their disposal, because then it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Right. What the rate should be. So we're trying to we're sort of behind in that area, but then so is everybody because the market's evolving so fast. Right. But we are trying to build some more features into the DAT1 app that drivers have, so they can put in, for example, what their desired operating costs are, and then we can match loads that meet that criteria. And then on the load board, I think you're right, Rico, there's a lot to be learned about how you match, how you find brokers, how you look for brokers that are looking for you. There's a way to use the load board to see which brokers are looking for trucks on your lanes. You can build lane maker, right. Lane maker. So all those sorts of tricks are really, really helpful, and more so today than ever. because in difficult times like this, you've got to look at other ways to operate your vehicle, not what you would normally do, because there's opportunities still out there. You just got to have a way to find them.
Right.
Yeah,
And I want to just say this to our listeners and guys that are out there. You know, I want people to think things. I want you to think differently instead of always focusing on what's not happening or what you're not what's what you don't have or what you're not getting. Figure out a way that you can bring more value to your customers and your customers, whoever is cutting you the check. So if you're dealing with the broker, stop looking at it with an adversarial mindset. When you're
Right.
dealing with the broker, think of that as that's my partner, that is
it's your
my
sales
customer,
force, man.
that's
Yeah,
my
it's just,
customer. Treat them as such.
yep.
Take a different approach to it and get away from the transactional side of it. If you're dealing with a broker on a consistent basis, try to deal with that same particular agent or broker. That way you have a way of developing and building that relationship. If you're
Exactly.
dealing with somebody different every single time, they don't know you from a can of paint. And
Right.
the, and,
Right.
and the more than likely, yeah, you might have some people on the other end of the phone that are a little bit more charismatic than others, but for a lot of times they're just doing a job as well. And if they don't know you or have any type of affinity built up towards you, any kind of rapport that you've established with them, they don't. I mean, what makes them more apt to be more negotiable or more pliable to your way of thinking and helping you get an extra couple of $100 if that's the
Mm.
difference between getting a load and also them understanding and knowing, well, hey, my man Rico is on this lane. Um, Instead of me letting them post this load, let me give him a call before this load ever even gets posted. What
100%,
Mm.
what
Rico.
do
But
you?
I want to add something here that I've seen 1,000 times, where there will be a situation where a driver's delayed at a customer's, and the the carrier salesperson or the broker will come into my office or one of my partners and say, or the branch manager and say, listen, driver's been stuck there all day, waiting to get loaded. This is our good guy, Rico. I want to look after him because he does this for us
Mm.
every week. All of a sudden, it's, oh, you're a good guy, Rico? Yeah, we better look after him. It carries some weight because we know who that good guy, Rico, is. And that's really important. And if you're dealing with every Tom, Dick, and Harry, you don't have that.
Mm.
Where,
Right.
and again, from dealing with the same brokers, same lanes, you become their good guy, Rico, or their good guy, Hank, or their good lady, Susie, or whatever, but you're their person. And you want that. That personal relationship will get you that extra that extra money for sitting at that dock. Because it's all about relationships. We say it all the
Right.
time on this show.
Yep.
So I just want to say this before we get out of here. We're getting close up on time, but spend some time, ladies and gentlemen, while you're in the truck. You got an opportunity. Get you a subscription to Audible. Um, Hell, go on YouTube if you don't want to pay the money. But I mean, if Audible subscription is about $20 a month. I think you can get three book titles every month for $20. Man, start getting you some books on negotiating. Get you some books on persuasion, different things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature. Start listening to those different things, and if you can just pick up one or two tactics from those books
Mm-hmm.
that you
It's
start to
good.
implement into your business, then
It's great
that's
advice.
that's what I mean by starting to do the little things that's going to set you apart, that makes you different from everybody else.
Right.
Everybody, you like, this industry is very big, but if you want to be able to carve out you a small little niche within this business and find you something to where um, you can create some stability in the lanes and stuff that you travel, then you have to find a way that's going to endear people to you and you to them, and they will start to look out for you, just like Chuck said. If you even if you get held up at some place and be like, man, and when you talk to them on the load to let them know how things went, that everything came off clean and clear. But man, boy, they held me today. They got me today. They may not be able to take care of you on that particular time, but you at least put a bug in the ear, and
Mm.
now they're attentive to that. they hear that. And okay, now there may be something if you keep doing it and you're doing it in a persuasive manner, then that may endure them to say, okay, this seems to be a pattern here. If they can't do anything to help speed the process up, well, we're going to have to maybe increase the rate a little bit more to take care of you on that end, so that to try to make it worth your while. I apologize about it. I know it's not much I can do on my end, but and just like we were just talking about, a lot of places with these lumper services and stuff like that, that's a crap job too. People. I mean, you think about it; those guys catch hell too. I mean, they can't find enough people to fill in to put in. I know that has nothing to do with your business in particular, but you got to just think about it as the old saying goes: "Shit travels downhill," and and it just is what it is. So with that being said, I'm looking at the time. We're getting close up on time. Dean, let the good people know how they can find you on share your social media with us. I want to start when we have the show. If you notice, I on my Instagram, I put my Instagram name right there. So instead of me just telling her, you can just go follow me. That's my Instagram name right there. Same thing on Facebook or whatever else. It's a good way, good little neat little trick to hey, if you want to follow me on Instagram, there's my Instagram.
There it is. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah, so we're on all the social media platforms, DAT Freight and Analytics. Just search for DAT Freight. You'll find us that way. If you've got any questions, you can write to us at askiq@dat.com. askiq@dat.com. We've got a team of people that are watching that email inbox. We handle a number of questions each week from carriers. You could watch our weekly show, 10 a.m. live on Tuesdays on YouTube. And I think the other thing is, if you want to get some hard data around our weekly numbers that we shared tonight, every Wednesday night we publish our weekly blog post at dat.com. There's a market update that I write each week, so there's some good information there. There's some good charts.
Absolutely.
The year-over-year charts, looking at spot rates over the last 5 years on one chart is always very helpful to give perspective to. You might think rates are bad now. Well, they're still higher than they were in the previous non-pandemic years.
Oh, yeah.
But operating costs have gone up like 50 cents a mile also. So, that's where they can find us. But askiq@dat.com is a good way to fire off any questions if you've got some. And I love Rico's suggestion about Audible books, YouTube. There's a lot of good DAT folks, customers that have done some really good YouTube videos on how to use DAT's load boards already published on YouTube.
Absolutely. All right, Chuck. Well, let the people know you're outdoor explorer this week. I see you in the hotel room.
Yeah, I'm in beautiful Binghamton, New York. If anybody wants me, you can send me an email, chuck@traffics.com. You can send me a private message on Instagram at Chuck Snow CEO. Or if you want to use the old telephone, my extension is 203, although it's changing any day now. We're going to have 4-digit extensions because we have so many people. But extension 203, phone number 800-388-4352. If you want to get set up with Traffics as a carrier and you want any help, I'd be glad to take you and introduce you to whoever we need to introduce you to. Or if I can just help you in any way, shape, or form with your business, just give me a call. I love helping. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back her into a hole for another week.
All right, good deal. Well, Dean, I want to definitely
thank
you for taking time out of your schedule to come on and join us here on the Rates and Lanes podcast. Always a wealth of information when we have you on. We definitely enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you.
I want to let everyone know, bear with us. We're still working out this new format. We're still trying to get all the technical stuff worked around and get the Instagram feeds up and going. But Facebook. The Rates and Lanes Facebook page. You can go to the Rates and Lanes Facebook page. We broadcast live there. There have been no issues with the broadcast there. We have started a YouTube channel, Rates and Lanes. Everything is Rates and Lanes. And we're also broadcasting live on Twitter as well, Rates and Lanes on Twitter. So you have a couple of different sources. We're trying to work out and get the Instagram link worked out so we can be broadcasting live on Instagram as well. I'm going to try to see if there's some kind of way that I can take these recordings and just upload them over to Instagram if it didn't go through. I think that's what we was working on tonight. But thank you guys. Thank you once again to Dean, and most of all, thanks to you guys, the viewers and the listeners. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us. And we're always grateful that you do so. Until then, holiday weekend coming up, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay profitable.
Can't forget that.
keep, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and God willing, we'll talk at the same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night.
Catch you on the flip flop. God bless.
Good night, guys.
Good night.